So today I wanted to offer up something slightly different in the way of meditation. So I invite you to relax a little bit and close your eyes. And let's send our consciousness, our awareness, far out into the depths of space. And let's imagine a great circle. Let's just arbitrarily say that it's a light year in diameter. So its circumference is 3 or so light years around. And let's imagine every human being standing side by side together, just on one little, maybe a degree of arc of that circle. So all of these 8 billion human beings are all shoulder to shoulder right next to each other. All people, whatever color, race, gender. And then let's start placing all of the other beings on the planet on the rim of that circle. The animals, the birds, the bees, all those four-legged critters, the reptiles, the fish, the sea mammals, and then all of the other animals we don't really think about very much. Little crabs and spiders and mosquitoes and all of those millions of species of insects on the edge of that circle too. That still doesn't take up the whole circumference of the circle, so let's start adding in all those little tiny bacteria and viruses and there's just so much life out there we don't even know the names of. And so let's imagine now the rim of that circle is filled up. Oh, I forgot the plants. Oh yeah, the trees, and the bushes, and the fruit crops, and the food crops, and the healing herbs. So all of those are on the rim of the circle too, because they're part of life on Earth. And so imagine yourself standing on the rim of this circle with all of these beings in the circumference, and then let's imagine a line, a thread connecting out from your heart to the heart of every one of those beings on the circle. And from each one of their hearts, a thread, a line, a connection going out to every one of those beings on the circle. And so the circle, the center of the circle, is filled with this web of relationships. And we're just a little bitty part of what's there on the rim of the circle. But that web of relationships is what sustains us and sustains all the other life on the circle. So in reality, we're not all in the rim, but we are connected in this way. And if we're connected well, that line, those threads, is like the surface of a drum, tight and vibrating with all the life that's there. And it's our responsibility to keep the head of the drum tight and those connections alive. So let's just rest with that image for a moment before I begin. So a few weeks ago, my wife and I were hiking up in Colorado, and we saw a black bear with blonde face. It was young. Kind of a guess, I don't know that much about bears, but we spent a bunch of time watching it because, to see something like that. It was on the other side of the river, so we felt fairly safe. But it was skinny looking, and it acted hungry, and it looked a little confused about how to make its way in the world. And we were probably a couple miles from human habitations. And so, I worried a little bit because bears and humans don't mix very well. And a young bear could get into real trouble. Because we hear all the time about bears being killed because they can't stay away from humans. So here's a question, one of many I'm going to be asking today. What kind of a world is it where we'll kill a bear that gets into trash cans in search of food, but we can't close down a corporation that trashes lives in the land in search of profit? It's a rhetorical question. But that question provokes another question, which is, who or what counts as a person? Now, a corporation counts as a person under the law. It has power and rights, and maybe it has some responsibilities. Bear is not a person under law, has no rights. Some people are not persons, and they also have no rights. Now, here on the North American continent, what we call Turtle Island, bears were seen as persons by most indigenous tribes. Bears had their own sovereign nation, as did the trees and the plants and the other animals, living alongside ours. And the tribes saw the world as webs of relationships, with each nation of beings holding a place on the rim of the circle of life, and the center belonged to everyone. And the essence of this way of living held that all the other life on earth are our relatives, which is true. We all share the same DNA. They're our cousins, if you will. And they're all beings with worth and dignity and something to teach us. You know how we learn to make pottery? Cliff swallows. You done by nests. People looked up and went, I think we can do that. But they're all equal recipients of the sacred gift of existence, with an equal right to their share of that gift. And of crucial importance here is sacred reciprocity, which says that all interactions need to strive to be mutually beneficial. We take care of the world, and it takes care of us. We honor the lives of the plants and the animals that keep us alive. We never take more than we need, and we give back in equal measure. And the result is mutual flourishing. Now that way of life is almost gone, and we can't go back, but we can bring some of that thinking and being into the present day. So I'm going to delve back into a little bit of history here. Western law and custom are philosophically based on Greek thought, religiously based on Christian theology, wedded to some of the worst parts of the Enlightenment, and then corrupted by capitalism. And medieval monks came up with this, what they call the Great Chain of Being. And this hierarchy posits God at the top, and then the angels, and then the fallen angels, and then humans, animals, plants, and minerals. And humans were given dominion over those below us by God. And we, of course, were made in the image of God, but as we all know, it's really the other way around. Our gods tend to look an awful lot like us. But this hierarchy applied to the human world as well. So we had kings, and then priests, then nobles, farmers, craftspeople, serfs, slaves, men, women, children, the rich above the poor, the saved, then the heathen. All ordained by God, of course, along with this dominion over command. And once Europeans began to colonize the world, they added another, the hierarchy of skin color, light to dark. And all of these hierarchies are still deeply embedded in Western culture. They're implied, if not explicit. So the Enlightenment was not just one homogeneous field of ideas that everybody agreed on. There were a number of branches: the English, Scottish, the French, the Dutch, and then the radical Enlightenment. And the radicals wanted equal rights for all, and an end to being ruled by religion and the monarchies. But there was a deep and passionate dispute among these thinkers as to the nature of the material world. The metaphysical perspective promoted by Isaac Newton and Robert Boyle, among others, saw matter as being brute and inert. Just a bunch of little balls bouncing around off each other. And they imagined God as a clockwinder of sorts, giving the universe an initial push from the outside to set things in motion, and then scooting off to God knows where. The other metaphysical perspective agreed with significant details of the new scientific discoveries, but they saw matter as being infused with an inner dynamism that was itself divine. Matter is the sacred flesh of God. Creation is a verb. To these freethinkers, if matter were seen as brute and inert, it would lead to unending attempts to conquer matter with all manner of destructive technologies, spurred on by visions of profit and material wealth. That's where the capitalism part comes in. The fear was that this would ultimately destroy the material world as both a natural habitat and as a humanitarian world for human beings. And that fear has come to pass. Now, it's tempting to consider that this is the precursor of our contemporary ecological concerns. But what these freethinkers feared, and feared more, was the loss of a world imbued with inherent value. Not just value we assigned, but inherent value its own. And that they happen to think the source of such value was divine shouldn't be a barrier for us. Because the point is if the world were filled with value, it would make ethical and social demands on us, whether we were religious or not, demands that did not come merely from our own needs and desires. These demands would come from the other than human worlds, worlds with their own purposes and meanings, worlds with just as much right to the gifts of existence as we have. This is an idea we're barely beginning to consider, or perhaps reconsider. And we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking this history is unique to the West, because there's lots of evidence of hierarchical societies and conquest and greed and ecological overshoot in our collective past. But the basic truth of life on Earth is that life needs other life to keep on living. Life eats life. Death means food. Decay from the bodies of the once living are resources for new lives. Life provides things other life needs to survive. Filtering the water and air, for instance. What we so euphemistically call ecological services. Species numbers fluctuate all the time, and sometimes those populations crash if their food sources have bad years. And extinction is not a rare event. But if your species consumes or lays waste globally, the basic resources that all depend on, disrupts the cycle of life and death, and poisons everything with carbon and plastic and chemicals. Well, that's what we've done, continue to do. And the climate crisis is just one symptom of this larger crisis of out-of-control humans. And the whole mess is teetering on the edge of failure. There are a lot of very smart people who think population collapse is just around the corner due to warming, ecological overshoot. It's what unsustainable means. This is not the end of the world, by the way. It's just the end of a way of life. I've been preaching and thinking about this since the late 80s, and I've been preaching about it since divinity school, and I'd pretty much given on it a couple of years ago because juggernaut just keeps on rolling, and most people think we can just keep on living like this. And when you tell people it can't go on, their eyes glaze over and the cognitive dissonance takes over, and they laugh nervously and look at their phones, and we silently agree to ignore the elephant in the room. There's a fairly widespread belief that new technologies will save us, but I think the problem is not how we can keep on living this way, but that we think we can keep consuming and growing in a closed and finite system. No one wants to give up their lifestyle. It's hard because we're so embedded in it. Alternatives are few. No one wants their world to shrink and have all this cool stuff go away, and I get it. It's amazing. It's incredible, this thing that we've created in many ways. And most humans live better than any pharaoh ever did. Sacrifice is a suspect idea in our global industrial consumer culture. We are rarely, never really asked to simply do with less, to rein in our desires. And it seems pretty certain that the planet can't support anything resembling our Western lifestyle for billions of people. It's already straining under the weight. The planet could maybe sustainably support our lifestyle for 1 billion or so. But which billion? And who decides? So here's a really big question. What would it look like if we each used an equal share of the planet's available resources? Like me, you, some random person in Africa or China or Latin America. What would that look like? So I run through a paper that I've tried to find again, I'm having trouble finding, but it estimated that we can support 8 billion people at roughly the level of comfort obtained by the urban middle class in Europe and America in the mid to late 1800s. Think about that for a minute. Could you live like that? Well, probably your great-great-grandparents did. And it means enough food, no avocados all year round, or shrimp flown in daily, or 27 different kinds of, well, we'll probably manage 27 different kinds of crafts beers, but an adequate diet of mostly local foods. Adequate shelter with clean water and sanitation. Clothing adequate to meet your local environmental conditions, but no concentration of fashion. New toys. And if you really want to go to Cancun, it'll probably take you days by slow zeppelin. But that's what our fair share looks like in a world of 8 or 9 billion people. That's what a just world looks like with 8 or 9 billion of us. And I'm not sure that leaves anything over bears or other living things, because there's just so much sunlight and water and nutrients to go around. And we don't have the right to all of it. You know, it's extremely difficult for us to sort of stop taking. Personally, I know it would take a lot of effort to reduce my American ecological footprint to that of someone living in what we so arrogantly call the undeveloped countries. And it's not because I don't do things like recycle, save as much energy or water as I can, or fly only when there's no alternative. It's because being embedded in an industrial consumer culture means that my hidden share of the taking force is enormous and almost impossible. Well, it is impossible to balance out with my own actions. So the questions before us are many, individually and as a collective. Who or what is a person with rights? What are the limits of our wanting? How do we learn to return as much as we take? And what do we give up so that all the people may live? The bear persons and the sea persons and the tree persons and the winged persons and the plant persons and the four-legged and all the other persons besides humans. We need them more than they need us. How do we make them persons in our hearts and in the world? How do we find our way to a sacred world that benefits us all in mutual flourishing? I don't have any answers. Somehow the answers must come from all of us together. No peoples, no Persians, no nations left out. That's going to be a real challenge. I do think a first step is to stop taking more than we need. To distinguish between our real needs and our desires for more and newer stuff. Desires that are manipulated for gain by an economy whose primary goal is not mutual flourishing, but profit, fueled by growth and consumption. We need something different. A way to stop and then repair and restore. The Buddha taught us that the root of individual suffering is clinging to desire. Desire for power and wealth or recognition or love. Desire for this or that. Desire for things to stay the same. Desire for things to be different. Dissatisfaction. To which I would add that the fulfillment of this seemingly endless wanting of ours is causing the suffering or extinction of countless other beings. And I can't even imagine the chronic debt of that. When will we be satisfied? When will we say, enough? Enough stuff, enough people, enough suffering. When will we say, we are content? I think this is really the heart of the matter. The deep hidden root of many of our current problems, including the climate crisis. And perhaps when that question is answered, that line is drawn, we can begin to solve some of these problems, because otherwise we're just moving the goalposts. So at this point, I can feel the questions hanging in the air between us like hungry ghosts wanting to be fed with answers, because we like to do that. We like to answer those questions and fix things and come up with solutions. But my advice is not to feed them. Share these questions with all who will listen. My hope and my dream is that these questions will lodge in our hearts like seeds and flower within us, and we'll bring them into our conversations and our deliberations. Maybe they will stay hidden, along with all the other questions we're afraid to ask in polite company. But I hope not. I hope these questions come alive in us, stirring up a deep hunger for something wonderful. A re-enchanted world for all. So today, I won't end with maybe so, but let us make it so. So I ask all of us to be gardeners of these tender inquiries, nurturing to grow into great towering trees of curiosity, with questionings ripening into fullness on their branches. And when the time is right, and the questions are ripe, the answers will arrive. And I, for one, can hardly wait to see what they are. Thank you.
It would seem appropriate after Munro's words to talk about contributing to the common good. We need to remember the ways in which our congregation and our donations to the congregation make a difference. They support our ministers, our assistants, our board. They help us reach out to the Taos Immigrant Allies and many other organizations supported through our charitable giving committee. In this time of need, your gifts are truly needed. Our treasurer, Joe Mazza, wishes to express deep thanks to you for your continued filling of your pledge and gifts. Please remember to indicate if your gift, your check, whatever, is for your pledge or for some special outreach need. Remember that your pledges need to be mailed to our UCOT P.O. Box 510 in Taos. And now we will collect your gifts. Joe will circulate among the congregation.
Sometimes I get ahead of myself. So I'd like to close today with a poem by Mary Oliver, one of our UU favorites. She writes, "My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the cooking yeast, there the blue plums. Here the clam, deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing, since all the ingredients are here, which is gratitude to be given a mind and a heart. And these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug-up clam, telling them all, over and over, how it is that we live forever."
here as we extinguish the chalice and speak together. We extinguish this flame, but not with the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together.
Thank you so much, Martha. It's so wonderful to feel the notes in the air and in my body, and I can't do that over Zoom. So, but thank you so much for your time. It's just wonderful to be physically present with the vibrations. So it's time for our benediction. Is everybody comfortable holding hands? Standing and holding hands? If not, it's okay. Because we haven't done this in a long time. I think we can get away. Come on. Because I miss doing this. I miss being in contact with each other and each other's physical presence. So, many of you know these words, but if you just repeat after me. May love and skill guide our hands.
May love and skill guide our hands.
May love and courage fill our hearts.
May love and courage fill our hearts.
May love and wisdom light our minds.
May love and wisdom light our minds.
May love flow through us and walk among us.
May love flow through us and walk among us.
As we live our lives.
As we live our lives.
And build a world.
And build a world.
Of mutual flourishing.
Of mutual flourishing.
Amen, Amen, Shalom, and blessed be.
Amen.
Amen. May it be so. Go in peace. Thank you.